Hello everyone, this is JW Talks Motorsport here, and welcome to my final video of 2024. Today's video is going to be quite different to the videos you are used to on this channel, because today we are going to go through my predictions that I made back in March for the 2024 Formula 1 World Championship, as well as the predictions I made back in August for what I believe the 2025 grid will look like. But for a video like this, it needed to be something special. So, bear with. Hello! Yes, this is my face, and yeah, I thought for this video, I might as well do a little face reveal. Although, I think some of you may have seen my face before on older channels before, but for those of you who haven't, this is my face. This is how I look in real life. Apologies if it's not how you believed I looked. Nothing I could do about it. I was born with this face, so that's life, I suppose. Yeah, I thought today I'd do it with a face cam this time, and also do it unscripted. So you're probably going to see why I script all of my videos really, because without a script I sound like a stuttering mess. Also as well, I apologise for my voice because I am suffering from a bit of a cold at the moment. I'm currently recording this on Tuesday the 17th of December. I was meant to record this on Monday the 16th, but I was pretty much bedbound from this cold. Thankfully I'm feeling a little bit better today, but I'm still not 100%. I've not got a blocked nose anymore, but my voice still sounds a bit off thanks to the cold. So apologies for that, but there's not I can do about that, and apologies for little sniffles here and there. But yeah, that's your cold for you. Your cold, my cold. So you can tell this is already an unscripted mess here. So I knew I'd be doing this video at some point at the end of the year, and that time has come. And I thought for the final video of 2024. This will be it. My reaction to the predictions I made all the way back in August. Now, August? Oh no, that was the driver prediction video I did for 2025. I meant the 2024 predictions. So right then, before we start, let's establish some ground rules, shall we, for these predictions. So, the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to do it similarly to how football content creators do their predictions, well, end of season prediction reaction basically, which is basically award minus points for every driver position that I got wrong really. So if I get the position for a driver correct, I get 0 points. If I don't, then I will get a minus however many positions I'm off by. There'll be 2 separate ones, one for the drivers and one for the constructors, because I also did a brief constructors prediction right at the end of the video. Now also, as a little bit of a caveat, because there were reserve drivers this year, for drivers who finish behind a reserve driver, I'm going to bump them up a place really, because with any prediction you can't really predict if there's going to be reserve drivers during the year. You can't really account for that really. So to make it a bit fairer, for any drivers that are behind a reserve driver, I'm going to bump them up 1 position. So yeah, I think without further ado, let's quickly switch over to the screen. There you go. I was originally meant to do this with OBS, but I found that overheated my computer, so I'm doing it the manual way of having a screen record and also a webcam record as well, and then I'll just place them together post-edit. So anyways, without further hold-ups, because I don't know how long this video is going to be, I think it's going to be quite a lengthy one if I'm being honest with you, but let's get on with it, shall we? So let's go on full screen and let's hit play. It's going to sound a bit weird here in my voice, but here we go. Being last in the standings. In last place, and I know it might sound a bit cruel, but I've put Kevin Magnussen.
Oh,
now,
already off to a bad start.
This is not to say that K-Mag is a terrible driver or anything, because he isn't. But this is mainly based on 2 things. One being the teammate battle, as I believe just like last year that K-Mag will be beaten by Hulkenberg. Not by much, but I think over the season, Nico will once again just have the measure of K-Mag. And secondly, the car he's driving. Given the rumbles about the 2024 Haas before pre-season testing, and even from their new team principal, Io Komatsu, the signs are not great.
Oh God, Joe,
and it looks
shut
like,
up, you've got no clue what you're on about.
Well, that Haas on paper
no clue.
have the worst car on the grid. I don't expect K-Mag to be pointless, but I don't think there will be many points coming Haas's way this season.
Oh, shut up, Joe. Shut up. Oh, that was a bad one. Okay, I got something slightly right in that Hulkenberg will beat Magnussen. Only slightly, I said there. I think he beat him by a significant amount in the end, it must be said. But yeah, it's safe to say a lot of us didn't have many expectations for Haas this year. For good reason, because there was rumblings suggesting that this year's car was going to be off the pace and it was probably going to be the slowest on the grid. And even in pre-season testing, it suggested it was going to be the case as well. But God, how wrong we were.
they were doing quite a lot of sandbagging during pre-season testing because they exceeded everyone's expectations because what a year they had. What a year they had. Hulkenberg definitely having a standout year. Magnussen, safe to say, very scrappy year for him, and obviously he won't be on the grid next year. He's going back to sports cars with BMW next year, so wish him all the best in that. But I am glad that Haas proved me wrong this year because it's safe to say Ayo Komatsu has done a bloody brilliant job since he became team principal. Way better team principal than what Gunther Steiner would ever be. And it does seem now the team have finally got a clear sense of direction. So I am glad that I got that slightly wrong. But it does mean in terms of the points, let's have a look where he actually finished. He finished in 15th. So that's -5 straight away on the prediction there. Not a very good start. Anyway, back to full screen. Let's see who I got in 19th.
I put Logan Sargent. Yes, even though I've said Haas have the worst car on the grid, I don't think they will fill out the last 2 places in the championship. 2023 was a terrible rookie season for Logan Sargent, after so much promise surrounding him during his time in Formula 2. Logan has been given another year to prove himself and to try and improve on the disappointment of 2023. However, judging from pre-season testing and judging from some of the teething issues Williams have had, whilst I don't expect Williams to be fighting towards the back, I am sadly expecting Logan to have another tricky season where he'll only gather a handful of points, and I expect him to be heavily beaten again by his more experienced teammate Alex Albon. I haven't put him in last, as I think he will just get the measure of K-Man, given the Williams on paper is a much better car than the Haas. But I do think he'll only beat one of them, which could lead to him losing his job at the end of the season. But only time will tell.
On the end of the season, try after the Dutch Grand Prix, Joe, because he got sacked. After he was already confirmed to be being dropped for the end of the season for Sainz, and then he got dropped after the Dutch Grand Prix to make way for Franco Colapinto, who, it's a shame he's not on the grid next year, but he might be, depending on the whole Alpine situation. We'll have to wait and see as the season goes on, I suppose. But yeah, it was not a good year for the races he did. It was not great for Logan. He did not improve on his 2023 season, and he came 23rd. So he came behind a few reserve drivers, including Liam Lawson. In fact, all but one reserve driver he finished behind in the end. So by my calculations, that bumps him up to 20th. So I'm on -6 now as a result of that. One off, but yeah. He did, outside the reserve drivers, he did finish last in the championship. Yeah, terrible year for Logan, it must be said. He did deserve the sacking in the end because he was costing the team a lot of money. Although, having said that, Albon and Colapinto didn't help themselves towards the end of the year, it must be said. But yeah, I do wish Logan all the best. I hope he finds something for 2025, whether that's in IndyCar or in sports cars, but clearly it didn't work out for him in F1. You could argue that maybe he got promoted to F1 a little bit too early, because I think Williams initially wanted somebody like Nick de Vries in the car for 2023. But obviously AlphaTauri nabbed him, so they were basically left with the only option, because they weren't going to have Latifi for another year. They were left with that option of having Sargent in the car, and it's safe to say it really did not work out for the American, which is a bit of a shame really, because his junior profile was actually very good. But it just didn't work out. It just did not click for him at all, which is a real shame. But anyway, I do wish him the best of luck, but yeah, it just didn't work out. Moving on.
Of Haas, in P18, I put Nico Hulkenberg.
God.
Before the start of the 2023 season,
this is a really
many
bad
people,
one.
including myself, wrote Nico off, as given he hadn't done a full season in F1 since 2019, a lot of people expected him to struggle and get beaten by K-Mag in the standings, given the incredible 2022 season K-Mag had on his return.
Fair.
However, this didn't happen, and Nico proved a lot of people wrong when it came to
definitely
qualifying,
did this year
as
as
he
well.
was able to extract the most out of the car compared to K-Mag to put the Haas in a decent position on the grid. However, when it came to the race, he would often tumble down the order due to the one thing that has been an Achilles tendon for Haas since 2019: tyres. Despite this,
I don't think it was much
Nico
this
had a
year.
good return to the championship.
I think they finally got on
expect
top
him
of that
to once
this year.
again beat K-Mag. However,
Strategy-wise,
given the Haas
they
appears
still
to be
need
the worst
working
car
on.
paper, I don't expect him to be quite high up in the standings,
Shut
which is
up,
why I have
Joe.
put him in P18.
Oh,
Next-
shut up, Joe. Again, I got Haas way off the mark this year. We get back to the prediction for that one. Yeah, pretty bad.
pretty bad. P11 in the standings, just missed out on a top 10 finish. So I lose 7 for that as a result. So what does that put me on now? That puts me on minus 13. God, I'm not off to a good start here at all. But wow, what a year for Hulkenberg, eh? I'd say he was probably the best midfield driver this year, I'd arguably say. Just an incredible year for Hulkenberg, really. Definitely way outpaced Magnussen, and yeah, he's definitely proved a lot of people wrong, and now I think fans are now finally warming to the idea of Hulkenberg actually being a staple on the F1 grid again. It's just a shame that he's moving to Sauber next year, which is a bit of a shame, really, because I think he could have continued this momentum with Haas next year as well. But Haas have got a strong lineup next year, of course, because they're having a brand new lineup of Ocon and Behrman. So I am curious to see where Haas goes in the future, of course, especially now that they've got the technical partnership with Toyota, which, who knows, may lead to an engine partnership at some point in the future once their contract with Ferrari runs out at the end of 28. So who knows, really? Who knows? But yeah, very good season for Hulkenberg, but not really good for my predictions, is it? Minus 13 after 3 drivers. Not great. Moving on.
Is P17, and in this position I put Zhou Guanyu. Zhou's 2023 season was okay, to say the least. At times,
same can't be
he
said for his
looked
2024
like he could beat
season.
Bottas on certain occasions, and would put in the odd brilliant performance, such as in Hungary last year, where he was able to qualify in a career best 5th. However, in the race itself, he would throw that away by getting bogged down at the start and then causing an accident at turn 1. Zhou is quite a hard driver to rate, to be honest. At times, he looks decent, other times, he performs terribly. Sauber throughout pre-season testing, whilst they've looked better than Haas, haven't really set the timing screens alight.
They really
and I
didn't
expect
this
them
year.
to be fighting towards the back, with maybe the odd points finish here and there. Which is why I've put Zhou in P17, which means
odd points finish. Yeah, try 1 points finish. Ah, what a horrible year for Sauber. Slowest car on the grid by miles. They were absolutely woeful this year. Absolutely woeful. And that's why I fear for Hulkenberg, especially as well, seeing that the signs about the Audi engine are not great either. So it's not going to go well for both he and his teammate next year, which we'll get onto later. So Zhou finished 20th, but he had a couple of reserve drivers above him, so that puts him 18th. So that's minus 1 on that occasion, so minus 14. And he even beat Bottas this year, although having said that, I don't think that tells the full story about Zhou and Bottas, because I think Zhou was arguably one of the worst drivers on the grid this year. Absolutely woeful this year was Zhou, and yeah, he's obviously not going to be on the grid next year, and it looks like he may end up being the reserve driver for Ferrari, but yeah, I think as far as his F1 journey goes, that's probably it for him. Not a great year for him, and not a great year for Sauber either. Moving on to P16 then, I suppose.
On the topic of Sauber, I put his teammate Bottas in P16, once again beating his teammate. Bottas I don't think is as bad as people make him out to be, but I don't think he helps himself either on certain occasions. His experience for a team like Sauber is valuable, and I do think he will beat his teammate again, but it won't be by much given the car he's in. Once again, I expect a tricky season for Sauber, and I also expect there at times to be inconsistency from both drivers. Moving on to P15.
I think there was inconsistency with Sauber in general, especially at the beginning of the year with their pit stops. Right, Bottas 16th, where did that put him? Well, he was 22nd behind all 3 reserve drivers, so judging from that, he was 19th in the end. So, minus 3 on that regard. I have completely lost count of what total I'm on now. It'll be on your screen anyway. We've not got one right so far, so yeah, Bottas, it's a shame he's not going to be on the grid next year, it should be said. Yeah, Sauber was just terrible. Bottas couldn't do much with it at all, could he? He had a much better year than Zhou, although the point standings don't suggest that. He was definitely the better of the 2 teammates. Neither of them will be on the grid next year. Sauber's going to have a new lineup, but I still expect them to be the slowest car next year, because my God, was that a woeful year. I mean, they only had 1 points finish this year, and that came at that very chaotic and farcical, you could argue, Qatar Grand Prix, where both Zhou and Bottas got points, I believe. Or was it just Zhou? Can't remember. But, on to 15th place.
I've put Alexander Albon. Now, I was tempted to put him a little bit higher, given the amount of brilliant performances he's done for the team since he returned to F1 in 2022. However, throughout pre-season testing, Williams have had a few teething troubles.
They'd have more
and
issues
given the likes
during
of
the year, for
Bravo
being
ahead
honest,
of them in
and
terms
that didn't
of performance,
involve
I don't
teething
think Albon
issues.
will be able to beat any of their 2 drivers, and in time, I also expect him to be beaten by another set of teammates, which I will get to in a bit.
Still though, I will go on the record and say that it will be close between P10 and P15, but I think in the end, Albon will end up getting
I don't think it was that close, but
battle.
it was...
But one thing for certain, he will definitely score a lot more points.
Yeah, I don't think it was that close.
And will be the driver.
Oh yeah, he scored a lot more than Sargent, that's for sure.
Like he did last year. In P14...
Yep, right, 15th for Albon. Where did he finish in the end? 16th. So one off there. So yeah, I wasn't really too far off, but again, I didn't expect Haas to do well, that's for sure. So yeah, for Williams, it was I guess kind of what you expected from them this year, I suppose. But at the same time, they had a lot of things going on outside of racing, didn't they? I mean, the amount of repair costs they had during the year because their drivers kept smashing the car up. From the repair department, it was not great, especially to the point where Colapinto had to use old suspension parts in the last couple of races of the season, which is why he ended up being quite far down on Albon towards the end of the season, but still able to match Albon, which was quite interesting really, given Albon had the new suspension parts. And it does make you question whether Albon will actually have a good year next year, because given that he's going to have Carlos Sainz as his teammate next year, a lot of people think that Sainz is going to find him out next year. So yeah, it's going to be that's going to be one to look out for when the Williams teammate battle. But yeah, pretty much where you'd expect Albon to finish this year. But goddamn, repair costs were massive. Moving on to 14th.
And it might surprise you, but I've put Esteban Ocon. Now that might sound a bit harsh to put Ocon in P14, given how good of a driver Ocon is. However, throughout pre-season testing, reports have not been great about Alpine's race pace, with some even suggesting that they have the second worst on the
Well, they had the worst to start
Despite
the season
all
off,
the weight
actually.
shedding that they did with the paint, although they've added some recently to the front nose, the Alpine appears to be overweight and aerodynamically inefficient. Even though I expect them to be struggling at the start of the season, I do expect as the season goes on that the team will improve.
Yeah, they did.
I'm not expecting them to have the same sort of improvement McLaren had last year, but I do expect them to be in a position where they can once again fight towards the sharp end of the midfield.
Yeah.
However, despite this, I do believe their poor start to the season will be reflected in the standings, which is why I have put Ocon in P14.
Well, it kind of worked for one car, didn't it? Because they only bought new parts for Gasly's car rather than Ocon, because of course Ocon was leaving Alpine, and then ended up not taking part in the finale, of course, because he wanted to take part in the test with Haas, which you can't blame him for. I mean, Alpine treated him horribly, it must be said. Alpine had the slowest car to start the year, actually, not the second slowest as I thought there, because I still thought Haas were going to be the slowest. But yeah, it was a tale of two halves there, really. Well, a tale of, I'd say, 3/4 and 1/4 of a season, it must be said, if that makes any sense. So, yeah, in terms of where Ocon actually finished, 14th, I got that right. Well done, I finally got one right. So, yeah, got that one bang on, it must be said. Yeah, I'm actually quite happy with that one. 14th place he finished in the end, so I don't lose any points this time by, which is very good to see. So, very happy with that one, and yeah, to everybody who laughed at me for putting these predictions about Alpine in the first place, how do you feel? Let's move on to 13th, shall we?
Moving on to P13, and I have put Yuki Tsunoda. V-Carb, or as we'll call them from now on, V-Crab.
I think I kind of drifted away from that as the season went on, because it was getting a little bit repetitive.
Some elements of the car looking very similar to the Red Bull RB19 from last year.
We won't be referring to them as V-Crab though next season, because they will be referred to as Racing Bulls.
Despite the tricky first half of the season the team formerly known as AlphaTauri had. However, after Nick de Vries was cruelly sacked from AlphaTauri to make way for Daniel Ricciardo to return, there were at times where Yuki looked a bit off the pace and looked at times like Ricciardo had the measure of him, despite Yuki having more time in the car than Daniel did. Once improvements came in for AlphaTauri towards the end of the season, the team were regularly fighting towards the sharp end of the midfield.
Yeah.
And during pre-season testing, they looked to potentially have the 6th quickest car on the grid.
Yeah, they were for most of the season, but I think Haas and Alpine overtook them eventually.
Well, is because
Gasly
I think at
overtook
times
them.
there will be some inconsistencies, some of which will be down to the team, others down to the driver. So that's why I put Yuki in P13.
Although I don't think Tsunoda made too many errors. He was still making erratic mistakes, don't get me wrong, like for example in qualifying in Mexico. But I think he kind of tidied that a little bit this year. I might be wrong on that, but I don't recall there was too many for Tsunoda. There were definitely moments, sure, but not as many as he normally has during a year, which I guess is an improvement. But I put him in 13th and he finished 12th, so I was just one off there. So, yeah, very close indeed there. But
yeah, Tsunoda had a very good year, it must be said, and he outpaced Daniel Ricciardo as well before Ricciardo was let go after the Singapore Grand Prix to make way for potential future Red Bull driver Liam Lawson. We're still waiting on the announcement for that, if we're being honest with you, but we'll get onto that in a bit. But yeah, Tsunoda, very good year from him. Bit gutting that he's probably not going to get the Red Bull drive, even though he had a test with Red Bull at the end of the season. But yeah, I don't think you're going to have too many complaints, really. It's obvious he's not going to be with Racing Bulls after next year because of the fact that Red Bull are splitting up with Honda after next year to form an alliance with Ford, and Honda, of course, are going to Aston Martin. And I hope that with Cadillac coming in, it does actually save Yuki's career, but I don't know, really. We'll have to wait and see on that one, I suppose. Anyway, moving on to P12.
In P12, I put Pierre Gasly. Pierre had a brilliant season in 2023, often falling under the radar by many people. Before the season began, a lot of people believed that Ocon would beat Gasly in the standings, and in the first couple of races, it looked like that was going in that direction. However, from Australia onwards, Gasly picked up his form and was at times just having the measure over Ocon.
God,
like with Ocon,
my accent went a bit
Gasly
there.
also picked up a podium in 2023 at the Dutch Grand Prix in Zandvoort, and even picked up a top 3 finish in the sprint race at Spa. However, as mentioned earlier, Alpine looked like they are going to be struggling at the start of the season. But once improvements come in for Alpine, I expect Pierre to climb his way up the table, but only into 12th due to the poor start to the season Alpine are expected to have. Yet again though, I expect Gasly to just beat Ocon in the standings. But once again, it will be very close between the pair.
He did beat them, although I would make the argument that it was because he had the newer parts towards the end of the season and Ocon didn't. Whether he would have still have beaten him, though, that is another question. But you can't really complain. Pierre had a very good year, it must be said. And he's obviously signed a new, 4-year deal with Alpine? Yeah, he signed a long-term commitment with them, if my memory serves me right. I said 12th place for him, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, he finished in the top 10. He had an incredible end to the season to the point where he was able to get that Alpine into 10th place. I do think the double podium at Interlagos may have helped both Ocon and Gasly out in that department, but they were there to capitalise that day, and you can't really blame them for that. So, very good for Gasly. I was 2 off in the end, so -2 on that one. But, yeah, obviously Alpine are splitting up with Renault after next year, so next year will be their final year with them. But I honestly see Gasly possibly being the only point scorer next year, unless they sack Jack Doohan at the beginning of the year to make way for someone like Franco Colapinto, or maybe Paul Aaron, given he's become the reserve driver for them. But I'll have to wait to see, I suppose. But yeah, Gasly's obviously going to be the de facto number 1 at the team next year, and I expect him to pick up the most points next year for Alpine. Whether they can maintain the pace that they showed at the end of the season into next year, or whether they have another drop-off like they seem to always do when coming into a season, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I'm pretty sure they'll want to end their relationship with Renault on a high next year, that's for sure, before they start their 5-year relationship with Mercedes in 2026. Anyway, moving on.
In P11, I've put Daniel Ricciardo.
And we go back down to
Daniel made his return to F1 from the Hungarian Grand Prix last year after being booted out by McLaren due to numerous amounts of poor results. Daniel proved a lot of people wrong last year and proved that his time at McLaren was just a blip, with him putting in some good performances in the races that he did. Daniel during those races looked to have the measure of Yuki on most occasions, and given how close P10 to P15 will be, as I keep reiterating, I expect him to not only beat Yuki by a small margin, but once Alpine get their act together, also have one of them in between himself and Yuki, given how close the battle between Alpine and V-Crap will be during the course of the season, once Alpine make those improvements.
That battle only happened towards the end of the year, but oh god, why did I fall for that with Daniel Ricciardo? I still maintain that his 2023 season was okay. I think everybody can accept that. And I was expecting that to continue over into 2024, especially given that there was a chance that Perez could have been booted after 2024, which does look like is going to happen now, despite that 2-year deal he signed. Obviously, Red Bull have had to pay some compensation for that to happen. I've read around 20 million, but I have seen 50 million somewhere as well. So what's true, what's not, I don't know. But yeah, horrible year for Daniel, and he obviously didn't see out the season, did he? He got booted out after Singapore to make way for Liam Lawson, and I think that is the end of his F1 career, unless he comes back via Cadillac in 26, although I have read that apparently that is fake news, that rumour about him being at Cadillac. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, that is his career done with. I put him in 11th, he finished 17th, he came ahead of the reserve drivers, so no movement there, but yeah, 6 off, so back down to Earth Famida, I suppose. But yeah,
horrible year for Daniel, and as far as I'm concerned, I think he has sadly passed it, I'm afraid. I even made a video, of course, you may remember. I'll put it in the card on the top right if anybody wants to see it. But yeah, it was just not a great year for Daniel, really, and he did deserve the sack. As popular as he is, you can't hide from the fact that he deserved the sack. He did, at the end of the day, and Lawson deserved an opportunity, and he might end up being the Red Bull driver, although personally I would go with Tsunoda if I was Red Bull, but I can sort of understand it, given he's a long-term prospect, and also the fact that they're splitting up with Honda after 25, which is clearly a deal that Tsunoda is struggling to get out of. Maybe he'll get out of at the end of 25 so that he can then join Cadillac in 26, but I think that's probably going to be difficult for him as well, so we shall see. But yeah, we've done the first half, let's see what the second half of the table looks like.
P10, and in this position I've put Lance Stroll. Now I know what you are thinking. Why are you saying that Lance will be a part of the P10 to P15 battle when he is in a car that on paper is way ahead of both V-Crap and Alpine?
Well, it wasn't in the second half, Joe. It wasn't in the second half.
2023, by all accounts, was a terrible season for Lance, as even though he had a car that in the first half of the season was fighting towards the front of the field, hence why Alonso got a numerous amount of podiums last year, Lance was nowhere near where the car should have been. Now, fair enough, the first couple of races for Lance looked very promising. However, from Australia onwards, his inconsistency, combined with the huge amount of poor performances, saw him only score 74 points and saw him finish 10th in the championship, whereas Alonso finished up in 4th with 206 points. Even during the second half of the season, when Aston started to drop back in performance, Fernando was doing all the heavy lifting for Aston, and I expect the same thing to happen again in 2024.
And I think he did.
I don't expect the points gap to be just as big this time,
I'm correct on
given
that.
Aston seem to be behind the current top 4 teams, but I still expect it to be quite significant. Significant to the point where Lance ends up being involved in the P10 to P15 battle.
Oh, you could say that, Joe. You could say that.
Top, given the car he has. Whether Lance keeps his drive this time or not, given Aston are having a hypercar program in WEC
he's got a 2-year deal.
Remains to be seen.
Yeah, he is staying in F1 for the next 2 years, although personally speaking, it does feel like his dad's forcing him to be there. To say that Aston were way ahead of VCAR and Alpine and all that lot, yeah, come the second half of the year, they were pretty crap, were Aston, it must be said. And I do fear that 2025 is probably going to be a year to forget. Although, it wouldn't surprise me, because I think they'll probably want to focus on 26, given that they'll be partnering with Honda from that year. Lance finished 13th in the end of the championship, so I was 3 off there. But yeah, horrible year, horrible year, and I just feel I'm going to keep saying that every year, really, until his dad finally has the balls to move his son aside, really, because he's clearly not enjoying it. Obviously, they've now got a hypercar program, so there's clearly an option there for Lance to race somewhere else other than F1, but he's not enjoying it. You could tell from his interviews he's not enjoying it. It just feels like his dad's just forcing him, which is a real shame. Tricky year for Aston, and it surprised me that they didn't even break the 100-point barrier this year in the Constructors. It just showed how poor their second half of the year was. Very poor, and I expect it to be another poor year for them in 2025 as well, as I expect them to possibly put all their efforts onto 2026 when Honda comes in, the new regulations come in, and of course they've got Adrian Newey, although him starting 2 months after everybody else gets a head start on development, that don't look good to me. But we'll see. Next.
Battle sorted out, so now on to the rest of the top 10. In P9, I've put Fernando Alonso.
I got that one correct.
Now P9 might sound a bit harsh for Fernando, given where he finished last year. However, Aston appear not to be in the same position that they were in the first half of last year, which allowed Fernando to be that high up in the standings. Aston, whilst they haven't looked bad in pre-season testing, appear to be behind the likes of Ferrari, McLaren and Mercedes, and of course Red Bull. Despite the amazing talent of Alonso, I think 9th is the highest he can manage this time around. Whether he will be with Aston for 2025, or whether he gets a phone call from Merck, only time will tell.
Well, he was apparently Mercedes' first choice, but in the end he decided to stay with Aston Martin for the next 2 years, with an option to stay for another year if he wants to. But I do wonder if his patience is going to run a little thin with Aston, given they've been going backwards. Maybe he's waiting for 26, who knows. I got that one correct, so
I don't think we need to bother with that one because I did notice he did finish 9th in the end. But yeah, he was. It didn't start off bad for Aston. It must be said. Alonso was right in the mix with the other 4 teams that I mentioned. But as the season went on, Aston just went backwards, didn't they? To the point where they were regular midfield runners, and at times were even fighting towards the back with like Sauber and Williams, especially around Mexico. Yeah. Poor year for them. It just feels like they know how to get a good start, but they just can't seem to keep that consistency up, and that doesn't bode well for when the 2026 regulations arrive and when Honda arrives as well. I mean, of course, we hear about the Max Verstappen rumours, but let's be honest, if Max arrives at Aston, Alonso's not going to be there, is he? Because Lawrence Stroll, he's going to want to keep his son in there, isn't he? But yeah, it's going to be interesting, that's for sure. Moving on.
Paid, and in P8, I put Oscar Piastri. Now, I was tempted to put him a bit higher up in the table, given McLaren looked good in pre-season testing, despite some teething issues. However, given the pace Russell was able to show on the last day of testing in the Mercedes, I've decided to bump Oscar down a bit.
Oh, you
now, this
stupid idiot, Joe.
That Oscar will have a poor season, as I believe he will continue to show the amazing performance that he did throughout last year. However, given how close it will be between McLaren,
I'm going to blame my
and
brother
Mercedes,
on this because he taught me out of that.
I expect him to draw the short straw when it comes to that battle. But maybe I'll be proved wrong. Who knows?
Yeah, I was tempted to put McLaren higher than Mercedes. Why did I back out of it? I let my brother get in my head there. So I put Piastri in P8. Where did he finish? I know it was higher. 4th. He finished 4th in the championship. Oh, that was way bad from me there. So that means I'm on -4 with that one. Not very good. Not very good there. Why didn't I just stick with my gut originally and say McLaren would finish higher than Mercedes? I mean, they did finish higher than them in the end, but we'll get to the constructors in a minute. But, yeah, brilliant year for Piastri, must be said. Yeah, there were times where he was a little bit wobbly, it must be said, especially towards the end of the year, where he seemed to make quite a few mistakes in qualifying, which then put him back for the race. But I do think as time will go on, I do think he is one that Lando is going to have to worry about at some point, because I do think once it clicks for Oscar, he's going to end up possibly being the new team leader at McLaren. I'm not expecting it straight away, but I'm just saying because of the potential he's showing, I think once it clicks for Oscar, that's going to get interesting at McLaren. Got that one way off. I should have stuck with my gut. I really should have stuck with my gut, but I didn't. So, there we go. P8 for Oscar, and he got his first win this year. First 2 wins of the year, although the one in Hungary was safe to say quite controversial. At least he made up for that for the one in Baku, which was a very mature drive after he caught Leclerc off guard with that overtake at turn 1. Even if it was via that dodgy rear wing that McLaren had, but we'll gloss over that. P7.
I've put George Russell. Again, like with Piastri, it seems a bit
cruel
to put him down here. But once again, given how close the battle will be between Mercedes, Ferrari and McLaren, I do believe Russell will be quite low down.
And Red
I do
Bull,
expect
Joe,
him to have
you
a
have
better
no clue.
season compared to 2023 though, as last year was not a great year for George. As long as he continues the pace he showed in Abu Dhabi last year and brings back the performances that we saw from him in 2022, then Russell should have a better season. And who knows, it might lead to him becoming the new team leader at Mercedes after Lewis leaves, depending on what sort of driver Mercedes want to partner George with.
It's the guy on the bottom right, Joe. P7 for George. I don't need to have a look because I saw he finished 6th, so I was one off there. Very good year for George, it must be said. Much better than 2023. Definitely one of the most improved drivers of 2024, it must be said. And he is going to be the de facto team leader at Mercedes next year, one would assume, given his teammate next year is going to be Andrea Kimi Antonelli. So, yeah, brilliant year for George. And, well, it's safe to say that he's possibly got a future rivalry in store, given his rocky relationship with Max Verstappen. All I've got to say is, Mercedes, please build a consistent car for next year, because there is a title battle waiting to happen there between Max and George, because I think that could get very frosty. Really, really frosty. Please, I beg. But yeah, good year for George. Beat his teammate for the second time. Overall, though, over the course of a 3-year period they were teammates, Lewis did beat him by 2 points. But overall, George, brilliant year for him. And yeah, I still believe he's a future world champion, personally. Especially with the performances. I think he's a little bit more mature than Lando. We'll get to Lando in a little bit, because I do have a few words to say about him, to be honest. But George, brilliant year for him, and let's see if he can keep it up in 25 when he's the de facto team leader at Mercedes. Next.
6. I've put Carlos Sainz Jr. Carlos
I think I'm one off again here. Yeah, he finished 5th. So,
as a result
don't
of
need
Lewis
to look
Hamilton
at that.
joining the team next year, and the fact that Charles has signed a new long-term deal with the team in January.
I have made a video talking about Lewis's move to Ferrari, which you can check out via the circular
and I'll put it on the top right as well.
Right, as it also talks about signs in that video. Carlos will be looking to end his stint with Ferrari on a high, and whilst I do think he will have a good year, I still don't think he'll be able to beat Leclerc, nor do I think he will beat the guy that will replace him. I do expect some races where Carlos will be off the pace, but will counteract that with some brilliant performances. Where he ends up for 2025 is still a mystery. Whether that's with Sauber, provided Audi doesn't cancel their F1 plans, or with Aston remains to be seen.
It was neither, Joe. He ended up at Williams. Yeah, I got that one way off. I don't think anybody saw Williams initially. Yeah, one off again, because Carlos did finish 5th in the championship. I'd say overall, it was a good final year for Sainz at Ferrari. Don't get me wrong, there were still some moments where he was a bit inconsistent, but I think overall, when you look at his season as a whole, given his no-nonsense attitude this year, given he pretty much had nothing to lose because he was out of Ferrari after this year, I think overall it was a good year for Carlos. Really good year, 2 wins at Australia, which, by the way, was a brilliant drive. But I think his drive in Mexico was definitely the best one. I wouldn't say it's his best win. I think his best win was at Singapore last year, where he definitely controlled that race from start to finish. I think that was his best win. But yeah, a brilliant year for Carlos. I think everybody can agree on that. I do think he'll beat Albon next year at Williams. I do think he will definitely drag Williams next year and maybe place him a bit higher than what Albon is doing. Who knows really? It kind of depends on what car Williams end up coming out with. Just as long as both Alex and Carlos don't increase the damage bill for Williams, I think everything should be good. But again, it just depends really on what sort of car they come out with from the box. Next.
5, I've put Lando Norris. Again, like with Oscar, I was tempted to bump him
Why
up
didn't
higher,
you, Joe?
and even at one point considered putting him up in 3rd.
Oh,
However,
I
looking
still
at
would have been
Perez's
off.
pace during
He finished
pre-season
second.
testing, and also Mercedes' pace as well, I've ended up bumping Lando down to P5.
You should have stuck to your gut,
like
Joe.
with Oscar,
You should have stuck
that
to your
doesn't mean I
gut.
think Lando will have a poor season. Far from it. Since 2021, Lando has been amazing for McLaren and has proven himself to be a real team leader. I expect him to once again have an amazing season, especially now that McLaren
on
seems to be in
paper
a
it
position
was,
where they are
but
back fighting towards
I
the
wouldn't
front,
say it was overall
which is
amazing.
someone who has
We'll
watched
get to that in a
F1
minute.
since the age of 3 and growing up watching McLaren fight towards the front, it is really amazing to see. Whether Lando can finally get his first win this year
He
is
did.
another
He got
question,
4 this
though.
year. McLaren were fighting towards the front. So much so that they achieved something as well, which we'll get onto later. Yeah, Lando finished 2nd in the championship, so that's -3 for me. On paper, it was his best year in F1, but if we're being honest, there is a lot of things we need to discuss about Lando. Because as far as I'm concerned, yeah, I think this year has proved that he is not ready to fight for a title. Fair enough, you could argue that it's because McLaren weren't expecting it this year, but it is something he needs to sort out in the off-season, because it was very clear that, particularly at Singapore, there were times where the demons were starting to creep in his driving. It was like he had some demons going on inside him, and that's obviously something he's got to work on in the off-season, because if he doesn't, then it's just going to keep repeating himself, especially if we are expecting it to be a close fight between 4 teams next year, which fingers crossed it is, because that will be amazing for F1. Especially in the final year of these regulations before we have the new ones in 26. This is why you need to wait for regulations to bed in, because if you jump the gun, this is what's going to happen and you'll come to regret it. So I employ people with the 26 regulations, give it time. Give it time. Look at these regulations and give it time, because eventually everyone will catch up. Anyway, back to the point. Lando, you really need to get your act together in the off-season, because if you don't, these mistakes are going to keep happening. Because take, for example, Singapore this year. Dominated the race, but it wasn't exactly a very good drive, because on 3 occasions he nearly bottled it. He nearly crashed into the wall twice. Once at the right-hander where he locked up and nearly broke his front left. The second time where he clipped the outside wall where Russell crashed last year. And even Lando also hit that same wall last year as well, but he didn't crash on both occasions. And then also, I think he had a moment with a back marker, if I'm not mistaken, which nearly cost him as well. So, don't get me wrong, I do think he is championship material. There is potential there. The speed is there. He just needs to find that little bit more if he's going to be consistently fighting at the front. Because
at times this year, it felt like the McLaren should have been fighting at the front all the time, and he was not making the most out of it. Don't get me wrong, I do like Lando, but he does really need to sort that bit out, because if he doesn't, these mistakes are just going to keep happening, and he's not going to be able to win a championship like that. So that's the only thing. Apart from that, the speed is definitely there. He just needs to work on that. Anyway, moving on, we can see who the 4th place guy is, but let's just go through why I said that.
7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton. Lewis will be bowing out of Mercedes at the end of this year after over a decade competing with the team, in which he has achieved 6 world titles to add to the one he already got at McLaren. Lewis, I believe, will end his time with Mercedes on a high note, and given the pace Merck showed during pre-season testing compared to Ferrari and McLaren, it looks like that could happen. Whilst I don't think he will win his 8th title this year, as I think Merck is still a long way from competing for the title again, I think him achieving a win this year, providing certain circumstances fall into place.
I was there. Well, he achieved 2 wins this year, but one was on a technicality because Russell got disqualified for his car being underweight. Yeah, he did achieve it, but to say it was successful, it definitely wasn't. I put him in 4th. He finished 7th, so -3 there for me. Yeah, it was not a very good year for Lewis, it must be said, and it has raised questions as to whether he is starting to lose it now and he's not at his best anymore. He's obviously got a point to prove next year at Ferrari. I think his last race with Mercedes, proved that he's still got it, but whether he can keep that up for a full year at Ferrari next year and also into 26 as well, when the new regulations arrive, that's going to be very interesting indeed. I still personally believe it's the wrong move for Lewis. I do believe that he's probably going to end up regretting it, simply because I do think Leclerc is going to beat him, because I do think Leclerc is a faster driver than Lewis. I do personally believe he's the second best driver on the grid, behind Max Verstappen, of course. Again, he has got a point to prove as Lewis. Well, I wouldn't say a point to prove because he's already proved his point with 7 titles, but I guess a point to prove that he's still got it. Moving on to 3rd, which I've got a feeling who it is, and I know it's going to be a bad one. Let's listen.
I've put Sergio Perez. Now, look, don't get it twisted. I am well aware of how quick Red Bull were last year, and I am also aware of how quick Red Bull have been throughout pre-season testing. However, let's not kid ourselves. Sergio's 2023 season was terrible. Despite having the most dominant car in F1 history underneath him, Perez throughout the season didn't drive to the car's ability. Now, fair enough, in the first 5 races, apart from Australia where he had a brake issue in qualifying which wrecked his weekend, Perez drove the car to its ability, with him grabbing 2 wins at Jeddah and Baku. However, from Monaco onwards, Perez seemed to be in no man's land, not helped with the number of mistakes he was making and a lack of pace during qualifying, which saw him fail to be in Q3 on 9 occasions throughout 2023. And even when he was in Q3, he would struggle to get onto the front row, with him at times either being in the middle of the top 10 or in the lower reaches of the top 10. Perez needs to step up in 2024. However, sadly, I don't see that happening.
And I was correct.
Now, sure, there is a chance he could do what he did last year, which is do well in the first few races.
Which he did.
But then afterwards, I sadly see him struggling again, which could signal the end of his time. Not just
my
at
God,
Red
I
Bull,
was so
but also in
right.
Formula 1 as well. As I personally think, unless Williams end up having 2 vacant seats next year, then another team is not going to want to sign him. But only time will tell, I guess.
Well,
so we have...
he did get an extension with Red Bull for 2 years, but it looks like that's going to get terminated straight away, and it looks like he will be off the grid. For now, of course, unless he ends up at Cadillac, but only time will tell, I suppose. But yeah, I put him in 3rd, he finished down in 8th. And that was mainly because once McLaren, Ferrari and Mercedes caught up, he ended up languishing behind as a result. Failed to achieve a win this year. Only achieved, 3 podiums? 3 or 4 podiums this year? His last podium coming in Shanghai, which was round 5. After that, he did not achieve any other podiums after that. The 19 races after, no podiums for Perez. It was a woeful year for him. Absolutely woeful. And that is why he's probably losing his seat as a result. Yeah, terrible year for Checo. And as I said, I was right. First few races, he did very well. I was saying all the time, though, during those first few races to people on Discord that I'm in, yes, he's doing well now, but can he keep it up for the entire year? And people were saying, look, he's fine now, he's doing a lot better. But what happened? We got to Miami, and he was back to his 2023 self, and
it was just a terrible year for Checo. You can't argue with that. To say that I've put him third is generous on this occasion because it was horrible. -5 I'm going to end up getting for him finishing down in 8th. And the fact that somehow the points gap between him and Max was actually slightly less than 2023 is really telling, really. Really shocking, but I think it also kind of tells how much Red Bull really went backwards this year once McLaren, Ferrari and Mercedes caught up to them. Especially to the point where both Ferrari and McLaren got ahead of them in the pecking order. Yeah, it was not a good year for Checo, and that's why I've got -5 for that. Moving on.
2 drivers left, and in P2, I've gone with Charles Leclerc.
Close.
Ferrari looked strong throughout pre-season testing, and they appear to be the closest to Red Bull, just as they were at the end of last year.
They were at the start of the year.
Given I believe Sergio will struggle again this year, I expect Charles to be the man that will prevent Red Bull from getting another 1-2 in the championship. Charles had a very strong end to last year.
Yeah, he was, but 5 other drivers did that as well.
And whenever Red Bull have an off day, I expect him to pick up the odd win here or there. So now we are down to just one more
odd win here or there. Yeah, try 3 wins, Joe. Monaco, Monza, USA. Yeah, great year for Charles, but sadly I was just 1 off. I put him in 2nd. He finished 3rd. He only just missed out on the runners-up spot to Lando in the last race of the season. But what a year for Charles. Arguably his best year in Formula 1 this year, you've got to say. Arguably the 2nd best driver on the grid this year. And personally speaking, I think he could be the one to possibly try and win the title next year if Red Bull don't get their act together next year, which is also going to be something to keep an eye on. I think Charles has now got it in him now. We've seen less mistakes from Charles this year, and any time that he was being screwed over, it was mainly down to Ferrari this year. It was not down to him. Yeah, sure, he made the odd mistake here and there, like in Mexico, for example, but it wasn't like it was a major mistake here and there. Yeah, he dropped 1 place, but that was it. That was it. It wasn't like he smashed it into the wall like we saw in 2022. This year has been Charles' best year in Formula 1, and I do think he's going to beat Lewis next year at Ferrari, and maybe in the year after as well, because I think he is going to be the guy that's going to end Ferrari's drought of championships, in my opinion. I think he is that guy. And I just can't wait to see what he can do next year, because I think he's definitely going to be one to look out for next year, that's for sure. But that does leave me with 1 driver, and it's going to be only the 3rd driver I'm going to get correct here, but it was pretty obvious. Let's go.
And I think it was pretty obvious before this video started. In P1, as you may have guessed, I've gone with Max Verstappen, because who else would it be? Max is an absolute freak of nature
and he still
right
is.
now, and is, in my opinion,
I think this
the
year
best
proved
driver
it more,
in the
to be
world.
honest.
Not just in F1, but also in motorsport as a whole. If you put this guy in sports cars, touring cars, GT racing or whatever, Max would still win in those categories. In fact, and I agree with Josh Revel on this opinion, I generally believe that the dominance last year wasn't all down to the car. Yeah, sure, the Red Bull was a dominant car last year, not least the most dominant car in F1 history, but I think a huge majority of that was down to Max. You just have to look at the Constructors standings from last year. If you take away the points Checo accumulated last year, Red Bull would still win the Constructors by over 150 points. Max single-handedly won the Constructors title for Red Bull. That's how insane he was last year. Adrian Newey looks like he has once again designed an absolute monster, and with Max in the team, I expect him to once again dominate the championship. Maybe even more so than he did last year. But hopefully not. Let's hope they don't win some of the races this year, rather than just one.
Well, Joe, let's see. Max was the only winner for Red Bull this year. He took, what was it in the end? He won 9 races, I think it was in the end. And 15 races were won by the other teams. So, by either Ferrari, McLaren or Mercedes. So, yeah. It was a lot closer than what we thought, let's be honest. But, yeah. Could you say that Max dominated the championship? I mean, if you look at the point standings, it suggests that he did, but it wasn't that easy, was it, for Max, really, in the end? Especially when McLaren, Ferrari and Mercedes caught up. Particularly McLaren, who had the fastest car this year, it must be said. But Verstappen's first half of the year was enough to win him the title, really. I never once thought, though, if I'm being totally honest, I never once thought Lando was going to win it. I never thought anyone else was going to win it. I still felt, even when McLaren and Ferrari and Mercedes caught up, I still felt Max was going to win it. I just felt the points gap was too big, and safe to say I was right, really. And the race at Interlagos was pretty much the nail in the coffin when it came to that, because he then went on to win the title the following race at Las Vegas. And, yeah, it's a deserved title for Max. You could argue it's his best title, if you're being honest, although I'd still
then again, the first title was a bit controversial, wasn't it? So you could make the argument that this was the best title he ever won, just simply because at times it looked like his back was against the wall on most things, but his pure consistency this year was just incredible. Yeah, sure, he did let himself down on a couple of occasions this year, like at Mexico, for example, and even at Abu Dhabi in the last race where he went for a nonsensical move on Oscar into the first corner. I mean, clearly misjudged that one, didn't he? It was a bit of a rookie error on Max's part, that one was. Apart from those things, Max has definitely been the best driver, and he's still the best driver in the world, period. And this year, he's definitely took himself to another level. Even when the car was not the quickest, he just showed just how bloody good he was this year. And, well, Interlagos proved it, which is undoubtedly his greatest ever win now. Undoubtedly the greatest drive he's going to ever have in F1. It's those sorts of drives that you see once in a generation, all that was. They always say that rain is the great equaliser, and Max showed that day why he is the best in the world. I do expect him to still be in the title fight, though, next year, though. Although reports are saying that Red Bull are not very confident about their 2025 car, given that they've no longer got Adrian Newey in the team, because he's obviously now gone to Aston Martin, I still expect Max to be in the title fight. But whether he wins the title, that's what I'm questioning, because I've got a feeling at the moment. We'll see when it comes to pre-season testing. Maybe my view changes then. But as I sit here now in December 2024, I don't think Max is going to win it next year. I think for now at least, 2024, maybe his last title for a while. He might win one again in the future, maybe when he joins, say, Aston Martin, if the rumours are true about him potentially going there, because it did feel like throughout this year that he was getting a bit frustrated with Red Bull, and you can only imagine that's going to transfer over into next year. It's going to be interesting, that's for sure. I'm definitely looking forward to next year, that's for sure. Let's quickly look at the Constructors then before we leave. And in terms of the Constructors, this is my prediction for that one. Okay, let's see what I got wrong here. Haas I put last, way off there. They finished 7th, so -3 there. Sauber 9th, they finished last, so -1. Williams 8th, they finished 9th, so -1. Alpine 7th, they finished 6th. Oh, if only Haas got them right at the end, then that would have been a correct prediction. V-Carb, or V-Crap, I put 6th, they finished 8th, so that's -2, and -1 for Alpine, forgot to mention. Aston Martin, I got that correct, so nothing lost there. McLaren 4th. They won the Constructors. That's how bad Perez was. Perez single-handedly cost Red Bull the Constructors this year. So -3. Mercedes 3rd, they finished 4th, so that's -1. Ferrari 2nd, I got that correct, so no points lost there. And I thought that Red Bull would win the Constructors as well. They didn't. They finished 3rd. So -2 on that. But yeah, I generally thought that even with how bad Perez was, I still thought Red Bull were going to win it. And, well, McLaren ended up winning their first Constructors since 1998. Who would have thought that? Stop looking at the microphone, Joe. Looking at that. But, yeah, that's my predictions there for the Constructors. Only 2 correct. So, not great. Shows I don't know much. So, right then, that's that one done. So, now let's look at the driver prediction video then. The person I believe will partner alongside Max Verstappen at Red Bull next year will be Liam Lawson. Well, we're still yet to wait for an announcement yet, because Red Bull have not announced anything yet, but it does look like Liam is the replacement. In my opinion, I believe the guy that will replace Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes next year will be Andrea Kimi Antonelli. Got that one right? I believe it will be Isaac Hadjar. In the last few races, it has been quite clear to me that Red Bull want him in Formula 1 as soon as possible. However, as you may have seen with my tweet a couple of days ago, that prediction has now changed. The person who is more than likely to get the seat now alongside Pierre will be Jack Doohan. Yep, unfortunately. The person who I believe will partner alongside Hülkenberg at Sauber next year, and then subsequently Audi afterwards, will be Sergio Perez. No, it wasn't. As it wasn't. But knowing Mattia Binotto, who is set to become the new team principal at Audi, he will probably do the opposite of what I'm saying. Yep. But hopefully not. Let's see what happens. With that being said... because he went with Gabriel Bortoleto. Now, that's not to say that's a bad choice or anything. It would have made sense to go with 2 experienced drivers, especially with a project like Audi that's coming in. But he didn't choose that. He went with experience and youth, and he's gone with Gabriel Bortoleto to be Hülkenberg's teammate next year. And with that is the predictions done with then for this year. And, well, I've been on for over an hour, apparently. Although I do think I'm going to have a lot of cuts, so hopefully it's not an hour-long video. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Very interesting predictions. I'll definitely be doing these for next year as well. And, yeah, that is my last video of 2024. Thank you all for watching throughout this year. It's been an amazing year. We've reached over, I think, 3.4k subscribers when I last checked. So very good year, and hopefully we can continue to grow this channel even more in 2025. So that's been it then, guys. I'm now going to take a 2-week break for Christmas and New Year's. I think the next time I'll be making a video, I think I've got it penciled down for, I think, the 10th of January, 10th or 11th, it's one of the two. But anyway, thank you very much for watching, guys. It's been an amazing 2024, and all I have to say is, have a very happy Christmas and a happy New Year. See you guys in 2025. Thanks for watching, and have a very good Christmas.